Um, a very good afternoon to one and all present today. Thanks for joining Inform's NCSU chapter. This is our third event in the spring semester. Today we are delighted to welcome Dr. Madhav Durbha from Coupa Software. He is heading the supply chain strategy, and he is a vice president, look after all supply chain projects and supply chain consulting. So earlier, it was a Lamasoft company. Last couple of months ago, Lamasoft was acquired by Coupa Software. Coupa Software is into spend analytics and spend platforms in terms of solutions related to contract manufacturing, procurement management, spend analytics, and so on. Now Coupa, along with the Lamasoft, it has now gone into a bigger division. So Lamasoft, as many of you are aware, it is very famous for supply chain network design, inventory optimization, vehicle routing, and so on. So those solutions are going to club with this spend analytics as a solution. Now they have a bigger portfolio. So we welcome Dr. Madhav once again. Let me introduce briefly about his background. So he is from IIT Madras. He did his undergrad in chemical engineering, and then he did his Ph.D. from Gainesville, Florida. So he joined various supply chain consulting companies to start with I2. Many of you might be aware who are all from supply chain network design background, I2, and then he was working with the JDA, Kinaxis, and then he joined Lamasoft, and today he is with Coupa Software. So in today's topic, he is going to give an important, I would say, prescription for many of us students from ISC OR background. What is this supply chain profession is going to be in the future, especially with the last 1 year. We all know how this COVID affected us. So there are so many uncertainties we may expect in the future. So as an industry expert and stalwart is going to give what are the things we are going to look forward and how we need to prepare for that. Thank you so much, Dr. Madhav. Thanks once again, and let's have your speech for the session.
Thank you, Srinivasan, for the wonderful introduction, and really excited to be here. And anytime I do talk to university students quite a lot, to the supply chain programs and so on, and anytime I talk to the students, it feels like I'm back in school again. So it's excellent. And I'm assuming everybody is remote. Nobody is physically present in one conference room, right? Is that a fair statement? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So I get it. Okay. As much as possible, if you can have your cameras turned on, that would be wonderful. So I get to meet with you and see your faces as well. But
Dr. Madhav, sorry for the interruption. With your permission, shall we have a group photograph so that everyone will open their shutters, their cameras? We'll have an opportunity to have a group picture together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I request all the participants, please open your shutter and open your camera. We'll have a group photograph, and this will be for our, bookkeeping as well as for our publicity. Oh, I mean, people are still joining, but whomsoever have joined already, they will get this stuff. I mean, how many people more?
Okay.
Lisa, Cameron, Amir. Zoo, could you take this picture now? Keep accepting participants, so they are still coming. Zoo, on your count, you take the lead.
Do you want me to take the picture? I think Zoo is having some trouble.
Yes, please, you can.
Yeah.
I think he's having some network issue maybe.
Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Yes, I should have it. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, please.
Great. And is everybody from NC State today in the session, or from different schools as well?
I mean, in today's session, we have so many different participation from different universities. We have our friends from India, Middle East, in the different universities, including Pittsburgh, Michigan, Georgia Tech maybe,
Okay.
And especially from India, I know people have joined from IIT Delhi, IIT Mumbai, IIT Kharagpur. So it's a big gathering.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. And some of you are joining very late in the night, so hopefully we'll make it worthwhile for you. So let me, so should I take it over and share my screen
Yes,
and
please.
present? Okay. Wonderful. Let me share. Sorry, I need to pull up my, too many presentations open. All right. Okay. So how much time do I have, Srinivasan, just to be sure?
We will plan for 1 hour, 15 minutes and 15 minutes for Q&A.
Excellent. Okay. All right. I will get started with no further delay then. You guys are seeing my screen? Let me know if you're able to see it.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. We can see only your face.
Oh, okay. Let me try something real quick. How about now?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. All right. So let's get going. And first of all, I'm assuming, is it fair to say some of you have taken courses in supply chain as part of your curriculum? So you have some base level understanding of supply chain and what it means, right? I'm hoping.
Yes, yes. We are from Industrial and Systems Engineering, and there are people from Operations Research. So supply chain should be, I assume, should in our blood and butter. Let's see.
Okay, all right. I'll go with that assumption. But again, I try to cater to even those who haven't done much of supply chain course background either. So I'll try to keep it a bit balanced. So real quickly, I think Srinivasan gave a fantastic introduction. My background, like he said, chemical engineering, and how I ended up in supply chain is a whole different story, maybe at some point in time. But I've been in the field of supply chain for 23 years. I've worked predominantly with Fortune 500 companies. I've done a lot of strategic engagement, transformation engagement, worked as executive advisor to heads of supply chain for some large corporations. I was also recognized as a supply chain pro to know in 2017 and 2020 by Supply and Demand Chain Executive magazine. Actually, it should say Supply and Demand Chain Executive magazine. I published, I write quite a bit, I blog quite a lot. So if you search under my name in Google, quite a few of my articles come up. I am a fitness enthusiast or freak, as they call it. I do distance bicycling, running. Recently, I completed a 70-mile bike ride, and I'm preparing for a century ride this year, which is 100 miles. So those are some of my hobbies, and my family enjoys traveling. So we travel around the globe, and except for the last year, where we've been quarantined and stuck at home. But that's a little bit about me. What I'm going to talk about is just introduce to you who Coupa is. Of course, Lamasoft may be a bit more of a known entity in the supply chain field. Coupa, not so much. They're more in the procurement space. Then I'm going to hone in on the role of AI in supply chain, because increasingly what I'm seeing is, especially as employers look for supply chain talent and people who are graduating with some concentration in supply chain, industrial engineering, operations research, it is also becoming increasingly prominent to see the students with advanced analytic skills, some understanding of machine learning, artificial intelligence, definitely it adds to your resume, right? So I do want to touch upon that in terms of AI in general and AI in supply chain, at least my point of view in where I'm seeing artificial intelligence being applied in supply chain. Then last but not the least, how do you prepare for a career in supply chain, right? And looking back 23 years in my career, I don't think there is ever a more exciting time to be in supply chain than right now. You know, if you're interested in pursuing a career in supply chain, there is never, historically, there has never been a better time. Partly supply chain as a field has been a beneficiary of whatever happened during COVID. Everybody's stuck at home and ordering last mile delivery. Logistics has become front and center for a lot of companies, especially as the consumer behavior shifted. The other thing that happened was the world's dependency on very few countries, like all credit to China. China became a powerhouse in manufacturing, but organizations are questioning, saying, do we need to have a China plus one strategy? Do we need to have sources beyond China for manufacturing, right? It's having companies and executives rethink their supply chains and say, have we become too single-threaded? The whole idea of just-in-time and lean manufacturing, has it swung the pendulum too far to an extreme? Is this an opportunity to rethink our supply chain designs? Is it an opportunity to rethink our supply chains in consideration of risk and resiliency? Has become foremost on the minds of senior executives. So all that is accelerating a lot of the supply chain investments that companies are making and contemplating over the years. That has been put on steroids right now. Every company I talk to, they're accelerating their digital transformation journey, right, with whatever happened during COVID. So indirectly, supply chain has become really a beneficiary of everything that's happening because of COVID. That's a totally unintended consequence, but at least supply chain has been put in the limelight. So really emerging as a sweet spot for a lot of the young professionals to look seriously into supply chain as a career. With that, just a little bit about Coupa. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of information about Coupa, but just a little bit in terms of what we do as a company. What Salesforce is to sales teams. If you guys are familiar with salesforce.com, what Salesforce is to sales teams, think of Coupa as spend. Okay, spend meaning anything that the company spends in terms of purchasing materials, in terms of logistics, in terms of securing even what they refer to as indirect materials, right? Like basic things like printer paper, office furniture, so on and so forth. Coupa provides a platform in which companies have full visibility in terms of what they are spending and how much they are spending on which suppliers are performing to their expectations, which suppliers are failing to perform to those expectations. So Coupa is increasingly emerging as a cloud-based network for companies to come together and conduct trade. Accordingly, Salesforce is to CRM, which is Coupa is to BSM. CRM means customer relationship management. BSM stands for business spend management, okay? So these are some of the areas that we focus on as a company: supply chain and design and planning. Supply chain design and planning, this came through Lamasoft acquisition. Coupa also plays in strategic sourcing, contract management, helping establish contracts with suppliers and managing the life cycle of those contracts. Contingent workforce, when businesses need contractors. For example, if you're a business and you are getting ready for peak shipping season, if you're a retailer, Amazon, getting ready for peak shipping season, then companies turn to Coupa to say, how do I source contingent workforce? I need to bring in contract workforce. Treasury management is a function within Coupa, which is around How do you manage the cash flow of the company? How do you manage the financials of the company? How do you make sure that you're making the payments to your suppliers? Supplier performance management, risk assessment, as well as inventory management. All this is part of the Coupa's business spend management platform. We have about 1,400 plus customers across the globe, 5 million plus suppliers. It is a software as a service platform, so we do manage almost $2 trillion worth of spend flows through Coupa platform. We have about 3,000 employees across the globe. As a company, we are upwards of $500 million in revenue. So that's the size and scale of Coupa. Really, Coupa established its presence in the sourcing. Now they are getting into supply chain design and planning with the LlamaSoft acquisition. They're recognized as a market leader in everything that Coupa focuses on. Procure to pay, for example, Gartner is a very recognized market analyst, and Coupa is ranked as the farthest in the leaders magic quadrant. There are other IDC, Forrester, other vendors also recognize different software technology vendors and put them in these type of quadrants. You can see that consistently Coupa outperforms the competition. You look at companies like SAP and others, Coupa is way ahead of this competition. Okay. LlamaSoft is now part of Coupa. So this is very exciting for us, Llamas. We call ourselves Llamas, and now we are part of Coupa. And the ability to bring together the entire spend of a corporation under one umbrella that includes supply chain is the vision that Coupa is after. So accordingly, a lot of the optimization technology that LlamaSoft uses. For example, a company can say, this is how much I'm budgeting to spend, but you can spend that money in 100 different ways. What is the most optimal way to spend that money so that you're maximizing your profit potential, you're keeping your cost base under control? It turns into a classic optimization problem when you think about how much a business spends as a whole. So that's where the interest is in terms of Coupa acquiring LlamaSoft, to bring that optimization, bring that advanced analytics and AI technology into the fold so that you can provide more of some very interesting insights and recommendations. If you look at our supply chain customer base, these are some of the very familiar logos that you can recognize. So we work with a very large number of companies. One thing that I take a lot of pride in is we do also work with a lot of nonprofits. We do work with organizations like World Economic Forum, UNICEF, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and so on, to make sure healthcare and food is accessible to the most remote parts of the world, whether these are sub-Saharan African countries and so on and so forth. So we're doing some very exciting work in that arena. So all in all, really an exciting company, exciting space for me to be in personally. So with that, I want to get into the core of today's presentation to talk to you more about supply chain space and where it is going, and the role of artificial intelligence. So supply chains are very simple in my mind, right? We tend to make too much of supply chains, but at the heart of supply chains, you're sourcing something, you're making something, sometimes you have to store it, and then you have to move it and you have to deliver to your customers. A simple process, right? And there are two objectives. Mainly speaking, any company I talk to, they say, we want to give the customers what they want, when they need it, and where they need it. Whether it is home, whether it is buy online, pick up in store, or your Carvana and you want to deliver cars through vending machine, whatever it may be, the consumer is getting to the nucleus of the world right now for these businesses. So the goal of supply chain is to give the customers what they want, right? But do so at an optimal cost. You could lose a ton of money trying to keep all your customers happy. But how do you make sure that you're doing that at an optimal spend, that is at the heart of supply chain, and that's the pursuit that supply chain businesses are after, and companies like Coupa help with that. I said supply chains are simple, so what's the big deal? The supply chain decisions are very complex. So if you look at a typical Coupa customer, they have about 300 suppliers on average, right? If you look at some of the large scale companies, the magnitude of the problem is much more. They do on average do business in 10 countries, 34,000 SKUs, 578,000 shipping lanes, and so on and so forth. These are not even like, this is an average across all the companies that we do business with. So these are not even the largest companies of the world. I'm not talking about Walmarts and P&Gs and Unilevers. When you look at that scale, it's mind blowing. Even within this kind of a median customer, or the mean customer, average customer size, there are 191 billion combinations that you need to sift through to arrive at some of the decisions that are needle moving for the company. Okay, just ponder upon that, the sheer volume of the decisions that you need to drive. So companies like Coupa, especially when you apply advanced technologies and optimization, there is a difference. When I look at a map on a static piece of paper, I want to get from point A to point B. There are 100 different ways in which I can go there, but Google Maps shows me one single way that is the most optimal. And just think of us as one of those companies that sifts through those 191 billion combinations and come back with quick responses on what is the best answer for a given set of questions that the company is looking to answer. Now let me get to the second part of the session of my presentation, which is around AI in supply chain. I want to talk about artificial intelligence and the role it is playing in the field of supply chain. So this is a pop quiz question. So the question is on the screen. What can you do with a 2 megahertz CPU computer with 4 kilobytes of RAM? You can type your answers in the chat window. I'm giving you a comparison basis. There are about 4 million times the RAM and 1,000 times the CPU in my computer right now. We're not scoring you, so just feel free to type your answers. Or you can type to me directly, that's okay. That's okay too. All right, only 3 answers, okay. 5, okay. All right, let's look at the answers. Sorry. Trying to access my chat here. Yeah, for some reason I can't see the chat, but that's okay.
So that will be in the top, I guess, when you're sharing the screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing the chat. So
okay,
that's
should
okay.
I read the
Yeah.
comments?
You can read the answers. Yeah.
Okay,
comment.
I mean, you want the name of the person as well, or only the answer?
No, just the answers are fine.
Okay, the first answer is land on the moon. The second answer is play MS-DOS version of Space Invaders. Third, plan to compete with Elon Musk. Optimize a traveling salesman problem with 600 notes. I will try to run out of the large scale optimization problems in one shot. These are all the answers so far.
Okay. Landing man on the moon is the correct answer. So that was the computer that was used to guide the lunar landing back in the day. Now, think about what you can do with today's computers, where so much computational power is sitting right here in my hand, in my pocket, right? So, so that opens up the potential for artificial intelligence, right? and what it can do. So when I think about AI, when I ponder upon that, I say, what has put AI on the map? There are three things. First thing is Moore's law, right? So there is this graph about human intellect. It's ramping up at a linear phase, but if you look at the machine intelligence, it's taking off at such a pace that we are, at least some say that we are approaching a point of singularity, maybe within the next 30 years or so, within my lifespan, where machines can probably be as smart as humans and maybe even able to emote and all that. So a lot of that to be seen. Maybe there is some science fiction there, but definitely one thing that cannot be undisputed is that the computational power is exploding right now. So if you think about humans versus AI, whether it is, a man losing to the machine in chess or a game of Jeopardy or the game of Go, which is supposed to be far more complex than chess, you could see that AI is getting somewhere. Okay, some may argue it is brute force. You keep feeding machines with lots and lots of data, and by brute force you're training these machines. But what cannot be disputed is that problems that were unthinkable about machines beating humans is happening right now. So AI overall has got a transformative power. AI is mainstream. When Dilbert puts out cartoons, AI is mainstream. So I'll let you read that cartoon. Okay. So it is in pop culture now. So it is mainstream. So there is no other proof when Dilbert puts out a cartoon. You have to acknowledge that AI is now front and center. Let's talk about supply chain. The AI adoption in supply chain is also accelerating. Some of that is because of the supply chain management action is shifting beyond the four walls of the companies. I wrote a blog a while ago about how math is becoming cool again. This is what I tell my kids that, hey, math is becoming very interesting again because of the rise in AI and supply chains becoming increasingly interesting. One thing that I do see is companies are dealing with a lot more data. Earlier, the data is to sit in structured format in some enterprise database, SAP or Oracle or somewhere, and companies are tapping into that data and driving decisions. Everything is around how many nodes I have in my network, how many machines I have, what is the utilization of the work centers, so on and so forth, and what are my lead times and all that. Now the supply chain action is shifting beyond the four walls. On the height of the trade wars, when Trump was tweeting about China and all that, companies were looking at those tweets and running scenarios on supply chain, saying, what if the tariffs go up by 10%? What does that do to my network, right? You look at consumer trends, there are a lot of fascinating stories. One of the projects that I was involved in was we were working with a soft drinks company. When COVID hit, what happened was more and more people started staying at home and consuming products at home. Accordingly, what started happening was the demand for the 12-ounce can started picking up because that's what consumers were preferring because they were at home. When the company makes and ships products to restaurants and hotels and bars and pubs and things like that, the product mix is very different compared to when they're shipping it to consumer homes. So suddenly the product mix started shifting. If I look at my enterprise data and look at the 3-year history and try to make a projection, there is no way I can do that. What did we do? We tapped into Google mobility indices. Because the phones we carry today, the companies like Google are very aware of where you and I are going at any point in time, right? Through apps. So with the location services and all that, they can track that. What Google started publishing was these at an aggregate level mobility indices, saying, how are the movements to pharmacies? How are the movements to workplaces? How are the movements to transit centers? How are the movements to commercial establishments? And they were time trending that and showing that these trends are declining. We paid that up against the COVID outbreaks. When you intersect data sources like that and bring that into supply chain decisions, suddenly you have an opportunity to refine your forecast and say that now I want to change my product mix and produce a different kind of mix so that you're not building too much inventory of one kind and running out of stock in the other type of products. So that's just one simple example of supply chain management shifting beyond the four walls. I hope this is making sense. Are you guys still with me? So if this is making sense, just put some emojis, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever it is. So I can make sure that you're tracking along. All right. With that, here is another pop quiz. Can you identify the man on the left-hand side of the screen?
Henry Ford.
Again. Okay, Henry Ford, that's correct. And the lady on the right-hand side?
No clue.
No clue? All right. Let's see if anybody else can put it in the chat. If I'm presenting to undergrads, they would know for sure.
Soumya is saying it's Kylie.
Kylie Jenner, that's correct.
Oh,
Kylie
kudos
Jenner.
to Soumya.
Okay, good. So the business models are changing right now. When you think about Henry Ford, he started a car company. He told customers, you can have any color as long as it is black. Because the whole Ford business model 100+ years back was built around the assembly line manufacturing. You do one thing and you do one thing repetitively and do very well, you can mass produce automobiles. Fast forward 100+ years. Kylie Jenner, who is, for those of you who don't know, half sister of Kim Kardashian, and hopefully you guys know who Kim Kardashian is, and she started Kylie Cosmetics. How did she do that? She set up a Shopify front end. She has the social media following, and she contracted with a manufacturer near shore in California somewhere, who is nimble enough to produce the cosmetics that she wanted to be made. She had a clear pulse on the consumer and was tapping into her social media following and tapping into what the consumers are looking for, what her fans are looking for, accordingly changing the product mix constantly and keeping that assortment fresh. To do that, you need a supply chain that is extra nimble. It should be able to pivot at the whims and fancies of the consumer. And this is the way the world is moving towards, right? So the notion of having a very nimble, flexible supply chain is becoming front and center for a lot of companies. Otherwise, these young disruptors like Kylie Jenner's of the world, they pop up and suddenly they become billion-dollar enterprises threatening the big brands, right? So that's one thing that is driving a lot of these changes and adoption of the advanced analytics and technologies in supply chain. Talk about Industry 4.0, you know, I'm assuming that you guys heard about fourth industrial revolution or Industry 4.0. The idea is to say that Industry 1.0 is about steam engines and that bringing in power and some amount of mechanization of production of goods. Industry 2.0 is about assembly line like Henry Ford. Industry 3.0 is more about robots, not smart connected robots, but the mechanical robots that repetitively perform an action, and computers and electronics. But today we are getting into this cyber physical convergence. Robots are getting cloud connected and getting smarter, and that's giving rise to Industry 4.0. This is an example of business models changing. Philips Lighting, that sells light bulbs, right? What are they doing? This is a case study from Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. What they're doing is now they're providing light as a service. Light is no longer a product that you buy like the electric bulb. Instead, a bulb that is connected to the cloud as an Internet of Things, IoT device, and plugged in, suddenly you have all this data that you can tap into and say, you can proactively deploy maintenance crew and replace those light bulbs or service those. So what you're guaranteeing no longer is a product called light bulb, you are guaranteeing light as a service. And that completely pivots the business model to selling products, to selling subscription. Because now these entities, whether cities or Amsterdam airport is doing the same thing, they now purchase light as a service. It becomes a subscription model where the companies like Philips Lighting are tapping into that connected devices and proactively deploying the maintenance group before the light bulb burns out, so that airports and cities don't need to worry about that aspect of keeping their facilities safe and well lit. Okay, so these type of models are emerging too, that are bringing a bit more predictability to supply chains. I'm assuming you guys are familiar with Stitch Fix, the clothing company. If you haven't done this, do a quick search on Google on Stitch Fix algorithms tour. What it is they actually there is this very interesting page where they're completely algorithmically driven, right? Because they're direct to consumer, they know what the consumers are looking for, what fashions are trending, and they're positioning inventory appropriately and making sure their supply chain is postured to deliver that. So supply chain management is increasingly becoming algorithms driven. Stitch Fix is a great example of that. Amazon Go. These stores are connected with deep learning technologies, right? And they are tapping into image recognition and smarter checkout centers and so on and so forth, where you don't need to stop anywhere. You just enter the store, pick up what you want and walk out of the store. That's fairly transformative. And we are doing work with companies like this in terms of helping them set up these stores with the right equipment at the right place, right time. But these type of business models are emerging and completely disrupting supply chains. This is this is a Swedish autonomous driving company. Their supply chain problem is very interesting. What they're doing is, these are electric vehicles and self-driving. What they want to establish is a network of charging stations. Charging stations based on how far a truck can drive based on a single charge, and the type of equipment could vary. And accordingly, you need to establish the right nodes of the network for these charging stations. A very interesting optimization problem, like a mixed integer programming kind of solve, where you're applying this supply chain design intelligence to very interesting problems like this, where electric vehicles, where do I set up the charging stations? Where do I set up the service stations and so on? Then the rise of cognitive automation. White collar jobs are starting to get automated with AI. So in case of Amazon, algorithms drive a lot of their business, wherein they are helping the sourcing professionals at headquarters negotiate the right prices with the vendor base. Okay, all that is now being driven by algorithmic intelligence. Looking at some of the projects that I am involved in right now, or I recently been part of through Coupa, through Lamasoft. Let me do a time check. Yeah, we are working with this medical devices manufacturer. What happened was, when COVID came, a lot of their product mix shifted. What happened was, people were not afraid to go to, this company makes cardiovascular equipment, they make surgery equipment, stents and things like that. What happened was, when COVID hit, a lot of people deferred elective surgeries. They didn't want to go into hospitals. If a surgery can wait, they said, I'm not going to get this surgery done right now. Things like knee replacement, hip replacement, and so on and so forth, right? They deferred that, but on the other hand, the demand for their cardiovascular care picked up because more and more patients were getting admitted to hospitals with COVID. So what did we have to do? we had to work with them to make sure that very quickly make decisions around their production. How do I want to change my production plans and production schedules so that I'm not producing as much of the elective surgery equipment, but I'm increasingly producing more of the cardiovascular care? How do I move this inventory to my distribution centers? For example, I'm getting stuff made in China. How do I bring it to US? Do I airship or do I ocean transport? Each of those come with different cost and impact my margins. What you want to keep in mind is if elective surgery equipment is not selling as well, I might as well put that inventory on ocean as opposed to air shipping cardiovascular equipment because it needs to get to the markets faster. Accordingly, you need to make a decision in the warehouses saying, do I want to expand my warehouse capacity? Do I want to lease more warehouses? Or by putting stuff on the ocean, I'm turning some ships or warehouses on the water, right? Is that a smarter move? So doing these kind of trade-off decisions is not easy. So, this is where some of the optimization technology, advanced analytics, and so on come into play. There are a number of other areas, like we are working with a commodities manufacturer in terms of deploying inventory of salt. What this company does is they deploy salt to cities for winter times, right? When there is snow, you want to make sure that you deploy salt so that the cities can spray salt on the roads and the snow melts, right? They are making decisions around pre-positioning inventory by looking at external data sources like weather and tuning their forecast, saying that, oh, this snow is going to hit these parts, so I need to move my inventory from this distribution center to this other distribution center and so on. The third example is an apparel retailer, and what happened was when COVID hit, a lot of their retail stores had to shut down, a lot of their demand shifted to e-commerce, and they had to pivot quickly and make sure that they are rerouting inventory that is in transit. And how do you do that? Again, algorithms to the rescue. Last but not the least is a company that we do work with, a company called Find. It is a nonprofit organization. They are establishing TB diagnostic networks in sub-Saharan African countries. The idea is to study the population densities and establishing the nodes of the network where the TB diagnostic and treatment centers need to be located. If you think about it, these are the supply chain problems that save people's lives, right? So there is a purpose to solving problems like that. So of all the projects that I've been engaged in, this is one of the most gratifying experiences to think about. It's not just about making companies profitable, it's about saving lives and making the world as a whole better. The other types of problems that we see companies solve with the technology, especially with optimization, is carbon footprint optimization, right? You have carbon emissions, and based on which you may have certain penalties and whatnot, and you may get carbon credits if you reduce your emissions. So what is the best way to route my vehicles and so on, in consideration of optimizing around these carbon emissions is another type of problem. So I just wanted to give you a feel for the types of real life business problems that we tend to get engaged in and help companies solve. So all this brings up an interesting question. Does automation kill jobs? Okay. So I want to present this point of view. When ATM machines came along in the 1970s, it was all about doom and gloom. People said, teller jobs are going to go away. Tellers are no longer needed, because what were the tellers doing? You would walk into a bank and then you ask for cash and you get cash, right? Of course, you need to have a deposit and all that, right? But you get cash. But with ATM machines coming along, people said, oh, tellers are no longer needed. Guess what? Now there are more tellers than before, than in the 1970s. But what is the difference? These tellers, their job descriptions have significantly changed, right? lot of the mundane stuff, a lot of the routine stuff got automated. And these tellers now provide higher value add services. I go to the bank, the teller sees my bank balance, and immediately they start offering me different services. Would you like to talk to our investment advisor, sir? Right? So it requires a combination of hard skills and soft skills, right? It's no longer about hard skills and doing one thing right. It's a combination of those hard skills and soft skills. That's where I see AI going. So I don't necessarily look at AI as humans versus AI. I look at it as humans plus AI. So if you engage in that kind of thinking, I think you can harness AI to the best of your, to the best of your potential. So that brings me to the last part, which is now that I talked about, here are all the interesting problems that are getting solved. Here is how the AI is transforming supply chains, advanced analytics, optimization being applied in supply chain. How do you prepare for careers in supply chain? So the way where I sit and what I see, there are some sample career paths. I don't mean to claim that these are it, but these are kind of dominant career paths I see students taking. You could get into academia, teaching and research, and a lot of exciting opportunities there. In fact, increasingly, I'm seeing a lot more collaboration between academia and corporations, right? Especially some of these fields are evolving so fast when you look at advanced analytics and AI and all that, big data, data science and all that, companies are increasingly looking to universities to turn towards the collaboration and stay at the forefront of technology. From an industry perspective, there are roles like you can be an analyst, you can be a planner, supply chain planner, you can build models of supply chain and run simulations and so on. And more companies have these labs, right? It's a funny word, but they call them the labs, the innovation labs, where they're doing some cutting edge research. And several companies are even open to producing publications and so on and so forth. And at least companies are getting more open-minded. Then software, companies like Coupa, right? Where you could be doing things like product management, you could be doing pre-sales, you could be doing consulting work. Once again, labs. Every respectable software company has got an applied research division, applied research wing or AI wing within the company, where people are looking at what's happening in deep learning, what's happening in reinforcement learning, and so on and so forth. How do I apply this to supply chain, right? And then, of course, consulting companies, right? Big and small alike, strategy consulting, process consulting. You could be doing technology consulting. Once again, consulting companies have their own labs to do some cutting edge research as well. So especially those of you who are graduating with PhDs, when I joined my PhD program, the only thing I ever wanted to do was to teach in a university and become a professor. And I'm as far as from being a professor now in my career. but be open-minded in terms of the career choices that you might have. Academia being one thing, those with PhDs and aspirations for doing some cutting edge research, there are opportunities that are available in private sector as well. I'm seeing supply chain emerging more as a cross-functional discipline. I graduated with PhD in chemical engineering. When I was in the 90s, when I was going through my PhD program, supply chain management was not like a well-established discipline in a lot of universities. Not many universities were offering core concentrations in supply chain. It was still an emerging field. But now supply chain has become a lot more prominent, and interesting intersections are emerging. I'm seeing more and more students doing a minor in computer science, minor in applied maths, minor in statistics or whatever, right? But there is this whole convergence of supply chain, operations research, applied math, computer science that is happening. So one advice that I can give you, if you're making course choices and things like that, try to dabble in more interdisciplinary kind of courses as well. That just adds to your arsenal as you prepare for the world out there. This is something I wanted to share with you as well. I think of myself as a T-shaped individual, right? I know I have a certain level of depth in few select topics. I don't claim to be an expert in everything. Certain areas I can go fairly deep. The idea of T-shaped individuals comes from this book called Range that I was reading the other day. It's by David Epstein. It's a very interesting book, and I encourage you to read that. He talks about there is an advantage to being a generalist, right? Where you know a lot of different things about a lot of different topics, but you need to have your specialization. So pick what your major is, and then try to dabble in courses that are that can be from left field. Okay, so there is a lot of merit to that. I consider myself to be a T-shaped individual. Again, each of us are made differently, right? You want to be an I-shaped individual, totally fine. You want to focus in one area and go very, very deep. There are careers out there. I mean, you could progress along that dimension. But if you are aspiring to be a business leader and senior executive in a company, being a T-shaped individual serves you well. Then there are more of what I call as the pancake people, right? Who know a little bit about a lot of different things, but know nothing about anything, right? That's a little bit more dangerous, but I like the T-shaped approaches to learning.
Dr. Madhav, sorry for the interruption. One quick question in the chat window, I just wanted to read out. Maybe
Sure.
you can. The question is about what recommendations would you give for recent graduate in supply chain? And there is a follow-up question. What are all some technical skills we need to learn? And it is a must for industry folks. Could you give some light on that?
Great questions. I think I'll get to those in a few minutes if you want to hold that thought. Okay, especially for the recent supply chain graduates. I'm assuming this individual who is asking is maybe recently started working somewhere and wanting to know, right? I am a big believer that learning doesn't end in school. Learning is a lifelong endeavor. But learning is getting more and more democratized now with the MOOCs, right? Massively open online curriculums, and there are lots of coursework and things like that that are becoming available. I will get to that in a few slides. So hopefully I will answer that as well as the skills that you need to acquire as well. I will touch upon that too.
Sure.
So I think there is a sweet spot emerging between supply chain management, understanding the principles of supply chain management and advanced analytics. And I consider people sitting at this Venn diagram, intersection of this Venn diagram, as kind of a sweet spot that industry is looking at. Let's dive a little deeper, right? In terms of what are the kind of things that you want to do? What are the kind of things that skills and courseworks and curriculums that you should be considering? These are just a little pitch for LlamaSoft or now Coupa. We do provide several certifications, right? Supply chain design, network optimization, multi-echelon inventory optimization, vehicle route optimization, and so on. What I would encourage you to do is these courses are available at free to NC State University. Okay. And if you want to explore more about these certifications and learn more about them, if you are joining from other universities and all that, I can share the contact information of the individual from my company with Srinivasan, and feel free to approach him. Okay. And then, so those are some certifications that my own company offers. And if you want to do a screen grab of these couple of screens, feel free to do that. This is one. And then this is the other thing on how do you apply to these certifications and all that. So just you can take a screen grab of this as well. Okay. Then I'll talk about some of the must-read books. If you want to really get grounded in AI, these are some books that I would recommend. Some of these are not as technical, but they are a bit more about either about real life application of advanced math techniques, or about a little bit more philosophical, if you will, about AI and where the world is going. One book I highly recommend is Gary Kasparov's book on deep thinking. This is Gary Kasparov reflecting on his loss in the game of chess to an IBM computer. And then he kind of wrote this book. He became a big tracker of artificial intelligence and where it is going. And this is a book that he wrote reflecting on his loss to a computer and the state of AI. Optimization Edge is another great book I recommend, especially in this book. It's hardcore focused on optimization, goes into a lot of industry specific problems and how they are getting solved. Last but not the least, this book on prediction machines is something that I would highly encourage you guys to read if you haven't read it. Courses I recommend, this is about the hard skills question that you're asking. Even though you're concentrating in supply chain, maybe you can do all the ASCM certifications and things like that along with your course curriculum. That's why I deliberately steered away from supply chain courses and focusing a bit more on some of these other types of courses. These are actually courses that I had taken personally in my career, right? These are three that I think are top notch in my mind. Why did I force myself? I'm doing very well in my career, and maybe I don't even need to work another day for a paycheck, right? But why did I push myself to do these courses? The reason why I did that was simple. More and more I'm seeing youngsters like you guys who are entering into workforce, right? They're better equipped than my generation in terms of machine learning, AI, advanced technologies and all that. So I went through this course curriculum. I did every single homework assignment. I get on GitHub, forked over some code. I wrote code in Python, TensorFlow, and Keras and things like that. So I just rattled off a few things: Python, TensorFlow, Keras, right? Learning these packages. Johns Hopkins offers a fantastic course on a whole data science track on Coursera. And as students, these courses are available to you at a very deep discount, or maybe free, I don't know. You need to look into that. But if you're a student, you qualify for a lot of free stuff on these Coursera, Udemy, and places like that. So there are things like, especially the question about early career professionals, somebody who recently graduated from supply chain, they want to dabble in something, let's say, knock yourselves out. I mean, there are several Friday nights and Saturday nights when my family went to bed, I was up 4 hours doing these courses, right? That was the best time for me to do this. Followed by a long bike ride on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning. So I would highly encourage you guys to think about these. Last thing I want you to leave you with in this presentation is, there is one thing that AI hasn't caught on to yet, which is the human ingenuity and the human intellect, right? Humans can think of highly unstructured problems and bring structure to that, right? Which machines haven't quite figured that out yet. I see jobs in the industry moving towards two ends of the spectrum. If I think about the physical end of the spectrum, where somebody is doing a lot of the warehouse labor and doing blue-collared work in production floors and so on. And then at the other end of the spectrum is people who are at the cutting edge of technology and AI and machine learning and supply chain and all that. I see in the supply chain industry, there is a little bit of hollowing out in the middle. Jobs are shifting to two ends of the spectrum: extreme physical dexterity or extreme intellectual dexterity, right? What do I mean by that? Robotics have become very advanced in the warehouses now, but they haven't reached to a point where a human bends over and picks up a product and puts it on a belt and then packages it up for a consumer for the last mile delivery. That part, robots haven't quite figured that out yet. Okay, so those jobs that still require that human dexterity, where you're picking odd-shaped objects and putting them somewhere, those jobs are not going away. In fact, the warehouse and last mile delivery jobs are growing like crazy right now. Okay, because the human dexterity hasn't been taken over by machines when it comes to physical jobs. At the other end of the spectrum are the intellectual dexterity jobs, which are more like, how creatively can I think? How can I formulate a problem? Interestingly, I think more and more skills, you will become more and more valuable, not for providing solutions. If you can formulate the problem, right? If you can bring structure to something that companies are struggling with and formulate the problem, then there are 100 people that are available to solve that problem, right? So how do you define the problem is increasingly becoming a very interesting skill set. So that's what I call as the intellectual dexterity end of the spectrum. But above all, I take this phrase from Thomas Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late, something called STEMpathy. STEM skills you guys are acquiring as part of your course curriculum and all that. But empathizing, right? Working in teams, just understanding the other person just as a fellow human being and being able to collaborate with them and getting beyond the transactional, what do I need to get done for this project or for this job, and just getting to know the other individual at a more human level will set you apart in your careers. Okay, regardless of whether you go to academia, whether you go to industry, doesn't matter. So that's something I want you to take away as well. So with that, I think I reached the end of my my presentation. So let's just have a discussion now.
Thanks, Dr. Madhav. We have some 3 questions already posted in the chat.
Okay.
I mean, we can start with what Tejaswini was looking for. She's saying, what advice you have for recent graduates for translating academic knowledge to industry needs in their job role, and how to drive change in the organization being early career professionals? That's the first question.
Great question. So Tejaswini, have you already graduated, or you're about to?
Hello, doctor. I have graduated. I graduated in 2019, and I'm working in Biogen now as supply chain analyst.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Biogen is a great company. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And you can just call me Madhav, by the way. So a couple of things that I would suggest, right? So there is the sphere of control and sphere of influence, right? Sphere of control comes from people are reporting to you, and then you're up in the organization and all that. Whereas sphere of influence comes from how you carry yourself and how you influence others, right? So I would say translating academic knowledge to industry needs would be, first thing I would always recommend is have a mentor in your organization, right? Make sure somebody who is very grounded in solving real problems. Just reach out to them, and you'll be amazed. Sometimes early on in my career, I used to be so reserved about approaching a vice president in my company, saying, "Oh, this guy is so big, and he's an executive in the company, and so on." You will be amazed and surprised how willing and open people would be to give you advice. Okay. So my recommendation is a couple of things. Reach out to somebody that is highly respected in the organization and who are solving some real tangible problems, and ask them that question, saying that, I see you're solving all these interesting problems. How did you make that work, right? And as you do that, this happened to me in my career. As I started reaching out more, that senior leader started taking me under their wing. Next time there is an interesting project, they said, "Oh, let me reach out to Madhav. because he expressed interest in this. So see if he would be interested in that. And then I'd be like, yeah, I would love to join the team, right? So suddenly people started noticing me and say that, oh, I recognize what this guy brings to the table. So that's how I kind of figured my way through. I didn't crack the code on day one, not even on day 1000. I was I was a little bit shy when I started my career. I didn't want to even be in the same elevator as my CEO, right? Those 30 seconds were very uncomfortable for me. And somewhere along my career, the pendulum swung, where I started loosening up, and then I started recognizing the importance of having a mentor in your career and in your company, and them guiding you. Does that help?
Certainly. I mean, especially with the virtual onboarding and working from home for such a long time, it's different when you're meeting people and when you're interacting and building connections on Skype. So,
Sure.
and within organizations having structures, you have joined recently, you want to do a lot, but you want to understand the structure. This definitely helps, reaching out will really make me learn more. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Sure.
Dr.
All right.
Madhav, let's
Yeah.
go to the next question. I mean, this question is from Ming Cheng. What do you think about the supply chain industry's growth in next 20 years, maybe 10 to 20 years?
So I think I'm very optimistic, very, very bullish when it comes to supply chain growth. Of course, I'm more from a technology background because I worked for software companies that enable supply chain technology. If you look at I do study the market growth rates and all that. 10 to 20 years is a very long horizon to predict anybody, and I don't claim to have a crystal ball. So I'll condense that horizon a little bit and say next 5 years, okay? Next 5 to 6 years. Supply chain planning domain is expected to grow at like a 15%, 15 to 20% clip, okay? Year over year, that is compounded annual, it's year over year, annual growth is around 15 to 20%. So the degree of adoption is extremely high. What is driving that? A lot of that has to do with, especially in the last mile delivery and Amazon effect, right? Where consumer behaviors are shifting, so supply chains need to invest in technology to cope up with that. So at least I can give you a projection for the next 5 years, but beyond that is anybody's guess. But I'm very bullish, I'm very optimistic.
The next question is about some technical skills. Is there a position that doesn't require much technical skills in the supply chain? That technical skills, I believe she's talking about more math and optimization and stuff.
Oh, definitely, definitely. There are skills like, especially when you get into customer service, service and logistics, coordinating customer logistics and so on. Or you could be at the procurement end of the spectrum where you're engaging with your suppliers, evaluating your suppliers and so on. If you are saying that math is not my cup of tea, don't worry about it. I mean, there are plenty of jobs where you can bring more of your personal touch, interpersonal skills, and those kind of things more to the fore. The other thing also I want to highlight is that math also, I don't expect supply chain professional to sit and write Keras code or Python or R or MATLAB or whatever, right? I brought it up only because you want to build enough appreciation, only if you have that mathematical bent in your mind, okay? You want to build enough appreciation that, hey, if this kind of problem comes up, I need to use optimization. If this kind of problem comes up, heuristics is a better approach. This kind of problem comes up, I want to use random forest quantile regressor models or whatever it is, right? So you want to just develop enough appreciation that this is what I like to do. But having said that, there are plenty of supply chain jobs where you don't necessarily need to touch math, but you need to visualize some dashboards, visualize some metrics, and drive some decisions that you need to do. But the visualizations and the graphs and charts and all that could be generated by the complex math that is happening behind the scenes, but your job doesn't have to deal with that. Somebody with more mathematical bent could be doing that, and whereas you could be focused a bit more on, okay, given that this is the insight that the math is giving me, what business decisions do I want to drive, right? Does that help?
She has a follow-up question. I mean, she is basically from operations management, and she's also specializing in project management. And her question is, do you think I can combine these into supply chain roles and future career opportunities?
Very much, very much. You know, your operations research background helps you in terms of appreciating the application of the problems. But the project management skills, I talked about companies investing in digital transformation. Guess what? Each digital transformation can spin off into 20 different projects. And there are timelines around those projects. And you know, you need to be familiar with waterfall project methodology, agile methodology, Scrum, and whatever it is, right? So everything, when I talk about companies going through supply chain transformation, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be a journey, and that journey means a series of projects that one needs to execute. If you are sitting at the intersection of project management and operations research, you can bring in that unique perspective of both understanding the operations research side of it, but also translating that into a tangible, solvable business problem. And to do that, you have to execute a project. Okay. A lot of the work that I had done early on in my career is project management, right? I was coordinating resources. I wasn't sitting there solving math problems. Please don't get that impression, right? I may be a math geek. I may understand and appreciate math, and I may dabble in some courses. Don't think of me as the guy who is sitting and solving differential equations or, you know,
Mixed integer linear programming problems.
Yeah, no. I'm far from it. I dabbled in it only because of my intellectual curiosity, but it makes you more valuable is my point as you acquire some of those skills.
I mean, for Chen, I would like to add one point along with Dr. Madhav. I mean, if you go through Dr. Madhav's career, I mean, the profile, what he had in I2 technologies as well as JDA, you will clearly understand and appreciate it. He was a project manager. He was leading so many transformation projects. So that pushes him to come to, I mean, to Lama Soft as group vice president leading the supply chain team. And now it is going to be even more bigger. He is going to be with Coupa. So the portfolio diversified. So his skills are very much applicable, and he is a living example with us.
No, I appreciate that comment. In fact, I started my career in customer support, where I was sitting and answering phone calls, right? Customers were running some optimization algorithms and things like that. And they were like, hey, I don't have this. This plan is violating my capacity constraint. What do I need to do, right? And it suited my lifestyle at the time. My wife is a pediatrician and physician, and she was going through her residency program, which was very grueling as such. So I did make some career decisions saying that I want a job where I don't need to travel. And then after she became a doctor and she started practicing and all that, then I said, okay, now I can travel anywhere. And I started logging 250,000 miles a year, traveling to 15 different countries, right?
Very nice.
So
there is another question it's something slightly related to ethical supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So Ajit is asking, what is the scope of ethical supply chain? Because nowadays many companies, even in our chapter, we had some presentations from Amazon. They were talking primarily about global warming, climatic change. They have some 2040, they have target like zero carbon credits. You might be aware of that. So if companies are factoring these aspects into environmental stuff, how we can develop our career, I mean, to support this, meaning because the next 20, 30 years is going to be our career, right? So what is your suggestions or feedback on that?
That's a fantastic question, very near and dear to my heart. So I'll talk about that. Great question, Ajit. So here's where this is going. Ethical supply chain has got multiple prongs to it. Sustainability, global warming is one side of the story. Other side of the story is how socially responsible am I as a company in operating my supply chain? Okay. For example, if I'm a brand, major brand, and one of my suppliers, not even my immediate suppliers, a supplier removed by a tier, right? My supplier is engaging 12-year-olds as child labor, making stuff in a factory, in a sweatshop. Guess what? It's going to adversely impact my brand if the word gets out. Okay. So there is an ethical reason for sure, don't get me wrong, but there is a commercial reason as well that companies, organizations need to be more sincere about running ethical supply chains, because it's not only about doing the right thing, it is also about protecting their brands. Okay. Say a factory somewhere is polluting the river that is running right next to the factory, and it gets into the press and pictures circulate on Instagram and Snapchat, wherever, right? I'm not even familiar with a lot of these social media platforms, but if that is happening, it's very bad for companies. The other factor also is the boards and the activist investors are taking more and more of an active interest. There is a reason why when companies, publicly traded companies, put out their annual statements, environmental responsibility and ethics, ESG, they call it, right? Environment, social, and governance, I believe ESG stands for, is becoming increasingly prominent in companies' annual filings. They are highlighting in their earnings calls saying, this is what we are doing for sustainability. We are reducing our carbon footprint, right? We are helping create this many jobs. We are employing women. We are employing minorities. These are getting discussed at the board level. That's because investors are forcing companies to do that. So the investor activism is contributing to that as well. Now, to your other question about how can I develop my career on that thought? One thing, couple of things that you could look into is supply chain and ethics and sustainability are becoming deeply intertwined now, okay? Reverse logistics, circular supply chains is becoming a buzzword, right? If you do a Google search on circular supply chains, you'll see that. It's not just about selling a product. How do I recover the packaging material? How do I bring it back? Okay. So there is a whole reverse flow to the supply chain, right? You have to design supply chains for that circularity. And increasingly companies are looking at carbon footprint optimization and things like that. Beyond that, you should also explore avenues like World Economic Forum, right? Which are trying to influence change. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, any place where you're moving stuff from point A to point B, either as a charity, non-profit, or a for-profit company, there is supply chain there and there is an environmental footprint you're leaving behind. So what I would encourage you to do is to look at even career options around NGOs and things like that. Okay.
I mean, for the benefit of the audience, I would recommend we have our next event next Thursday. We planned with Patrick Murray, who is also with us in the participants list. He's going to talk completely about circular economy. He's going to talk about reverse logistics and completely with respect to that particular reverse supply chain design and so on. He's basically from Intel Corporation. So I think all the participants, you can register for next week events so that you will get this opportunity for him as well. Our next question is related to LlamaSoft certification. I mean, LlamaSoft is always close to my heart. I mean, I started my supply chain network design inventory optimization using LlamaSoft Supply Chain Guru when I was working in previously consulting. So his question was, Kabilan is asking, how does LlamaSoft certification help us in developing our career as a supply chain professional? Do we need to have some prerequisites to learn that certification?
Great question. I don't know about prerequisites. So Srinivasan, what I'll do is I'll connect you with Dan Kogan, and then you can get the questions answered for the students here. Does it help? It definitely does not hurt. Let me put it this way, right? Is it going to guarantee a job in supply chain? I would be honest with you, right? It is just another credential that is very good to have on your resume, especially if you're applying for a supply chain optimization, network optimization kind of curriculum. People know LlamaSoft. It's got the brand recognition. So when you say that, hey, I got this credential from LlamaSoft, it's a very good conversation point to have, very good thing to have on your resume. So that's how I would articulate it.
So Kavilan, for your information, go do it. This is definitely going to help you. He is very modest. He is not telling positive about LlamaSoft so broadly. So you can do this job. I mean, the next question is primarily on, I think there are...
Actually, I'm reading Patrick's comment as well. And no, fantastic insights, Patrick. And feel free to chime in with your own thoughts in everything that I'm talking. You know, I don't want this to be a monologue or anything. So no, but those are good. Procurement, dealing with customs, supply chain audits. Those are all very, very valid points where math is not necessarily required.
There is another question from Cameroon. She's asking, can you briefly discuss how your PhD in chemical engineering led to program management and into supply chain strategy now? She wants to know your background. That's it.
Okay, all right. So look, I never got trained professionally for program management or project management in school. It was all on the job learning. Okay. So it was on the job learning. I learned as I go, but to my earlier comment about having mentors, I had the good fortune of working under some good, solid project managers and program managers. Everything I learned is from my mentors, right, on the job. So I had an opportunity to observe them in action. I had an opportunity to how they carried themselves with their clients, and I just picked up as I went, okay? In terms of how my PhD in chemical engineering led to supply chain strategy or supply chain, I'll be just totally be candid with you. I just stumbled on supply chain. Here's how it happened though, in terms of my own reflecting on my PhD and what transpired. One thing I was doing was I was an avid reader. I would pick up a book and read it end to end. Like I would devour, I eat books for lunch and dinner. So when I was in my PhD program, somehow I got carried away. I started reading about Andy Grove, who's the founder, the CEO of Intel, and then Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison and the Silicon Valley personalities. So suddenly the whole tech space became very, very appealing to me. This was back in the 90s. Said, hey, you know, I want to end up in the tech space somehow, right? Then the second thing that happened was I was on a visa, and at the time the market was a little tight in the non-tech space when I was graduating. So I had a couple of career options. One is I got an offer as a research scientist in Argonne National Labs to work on fuel cells research. I had another job offer to be a corrosion engineer because my PhD was in electrochemical engineering. So I was deciding between the two, and then a friend of mine called me and said, hey, you know, have you thought about I2? I said, who is I2? Said, they're a supply chain company. I said, what is supply chain? Right? So keep in mind, that was the time when universities were not teaching people about supply chain. And I2 was kind of defining this supply chain planning space. And credit to the founders of the company, they took a very open-ended approach and said, regardless of your background, if you have that analytical mindset and a little bit of a mathematical bent, we will train you on the job. All we need is bring in some of the best and brightest. And at that point in time, I had to pretend and make somebody believe that I was one of the best and brightest, and then they brought me to the company. Rest, as they say, is history. Everything about supply chain is something I learned on the job. But what I started realizing was 1 year into my career, this was back in '99, I was newly married, and I was talking about, you know, to my to my wife saying, hey, these people are talking about bill of material, production schedules, and this and that, master production schedule. I don't know any of this. So I'm going to take these courses. So I enrolled in the Apex CPIM curriculum. Then I finished the CIRM curriculum. Then I got into, as I started doing project management, I went and did the project management certification, PMI, the Project Management Institute certification. So two things I did well was, in a way, I faked until I made it, and then I made it, right? As I took the courses and all that, it started becoming a second nature. It's not that complex, is what I started realizing. I see Patrick's comments. So Patrick is from Intel, I guess. So I'm sure he's familiar with Andy Grove and his books. So,
yes, I'm very familiar. And Dr. Durbha, if you haven't read it yet, there's a book by John Doerr that is called Measure What Matters, or something like that. Let me look at it. Yeah, it's Measure What Matters. Here, let me turn on my my video. So John used to work at Intel. Yeah. Before me. And then he went to go become a venture capitalist and invented in Google, Facebook, all these great companies.
Interesting. That's I just added to my book list, and nice to meet you, Patrick.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Sorry for jumping in on your.
No, totally fine. Totally fine. Anything else? I think we got just about 2 minutes.
Yeah, last 2 minutes. Golden opportunity to talk to the industry expert, supply chain strategist. Any last questions from audience?
Any feedback? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Is this useful at all, or?
It was very nice to listen to everything. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Good. Awesome. Well, it's great meeting everybody. And yeah, just if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot me a LinkedIn or whatever, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhav. Right. It was pleasant hosting you, and we had a very good opportunity to, listen to your career experiences, what we need to primarily prepare for during our, graduate program, as well as after we graduate, how we need to look forward. And on behalf of NCSU, Informs chapter, we thanks once again for the sponsorship and freebies. Those who are participating today, you guys will be given a small gift on Monday. We will send you an email separately. You guys will have this, small gift. Kim and Stephanie, they are from the marketing team. They sent that on time, and I should again thank Dr. Madhav to get that, gracious support. So we look forward. I mean, in some good occasion again, probably we will invite you and take, some another session with you.
Sure, most certainly. And remember, now it is called Coupa.
Yes.
So when you think supply chain, think Coupa.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you all for all your participation today. Bye-bye.
All right. Nice meeting you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.